Hello, welcome to the first video for the post-production camp. I hope you have a comfortable chair. Okay, so for this first video, what I'm going to do is work fairly slowly so that I can go through the basics of what I do in most of my work. Now, I work in Lightroom 4. Lightroom 4 has some amazing features, so if you haven't upgraded to Lightroom 4, I highly recommend it. I think it's like $170, something like that. Truly worth doing. Maybe by the end of this year too they'll have a Lightroom 5, who knows, but they seem to update fairly quickly and I'll be updating right away. So Lightroom 4 for now. Now this is a file straight out of camera. As you can see, I'm pressing reset, so nothing has been done to it. We're going to work on enhancing the colors within the photograph, and that tends to be what I look to do when I'm working in Lightroom and Photoshop. I'm trying to enhance the colors within a photograph. I like my color, as many of you already know, so if I can enhance it in any way and draw out the color, then that's ideal. Okay, so straight away I'm looking at this thinking, okay, that's a great sky behind. On the day I remember the sun was going down, in the bottom left hand corner you can see that there's orange in the sky. So I want to see if I can enhance that a little bit. So straight off the bat I'm going to drag the highlights down. So I'm going to make those about -80, so that's basically dragging it all the way to the end of the line. And what that does is it brings back the highlights. Then the whites here, I'm also going to drag that down, and as you can see, that has also brought back areas that are white within the photograph. Now if there aren't areas that are white, it actually brings it down to grey. So I'm quite happy for it to do that in that photograph. Now I already have a little bit more of a blue sky up here, just a little bit more, it's a bit darker. Okay, so in order to enhance that a little bit more, I'm going to go down to the saturation area, which is just bear with me, which is in the HSL I should say, area. Okay, so now if I go down to luminance, so I'm clicking on luminance, I've got the blue, and what I want to do is darken the blue. So that's lightening it, that's darkening it. Now be aware when you do that, it's going to darken any blues within the photograph. Sometimes moving the aqua also helps, but not in this case. So now I'm going to go into the saturation and brighten the saturation of that blue, make that blue a lot darker. I'm also going to go into the hue and make sure the aquas are dragged across towards the blue. That stops the ring, which is like a ring in the sky happening. Sometimes you might find that there's a gradient within the sky, which is a semicircle when you drag this across, so that might remove that. Now that I've enhanced the sky a little bit more, let's have a look at the before and after. I'm looking at selectively enhancing things. So I'm going to grab the adjustment brush, and this is the great thing about Lightroom 4. The adjustment brush can now tint. Okay, so I'm going to add a magenta and a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to paint onto the pink bath, and I'm also going to paint onto the balloons. Now looking at this photograph, I can see that the magenta of the balloons is a different magenta of the bath. So what I would like to do is match that up. So I'm going to grab a new adjustment brush. Now adjustment brushes are like layers, you can have as many as you want. So this was the first one, and if you mouse over it shows where you painted. I've got a new one, and I'm going to make this one a little bit more blue and a little bit more magenta. Okay. So now the bathtub is matching the balloons a lot better. However, there we go. That was a little bit too blue. Alright, now that I've done that, I can grab another adjustment brush, and this time I'm just going to saturate that bathtub up selectively a little bit to match the luminance of the balloons. Okay, there we go. Now looking at the grass, that grass could be a whole other different colour. So just for fun and giggles, what I'm going to do is grab a new adjustment brush. So now we have a third one. Oh, no, that one's still working on that one. Wait a minute. Okay, so I'll grab a new one. Okay, so I'm going to drag the temperature down to blue and, well, maybe not so blue, the tint down to green, and just paint on the grass a little bit. Okay. Here we have it. Great. Alright, now the sky, another adjustment brush. Now, you can be as fast or as slow as you want with this. I'm just showing you to the extremities that you could actually go. So I'm now going to add some orange back into the sky with the adjustment brush back here. Now you're going to find that I'm not a cut and paste sky girl. I don't tend to do that because I find that you don't actually need to these days. That with the mix of the exposure that you can get out of camera and using the Lightroom technology, you can bring that detail back in. You really don't need to be cutting and pasting sky in. Alright, so now one last thing, new adjustment brush. So I would like, now I've got all this colour around her, for the attention to be drawn back to her. She's pretty cute in there, and this is about her after all. So I'm going to just grab a new adjustment brush and dab a little bit of exposure on her face and lighten her up a little bit. Now, she's gone a little bit orange, so I'm going to desaturate as well while I lighten. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but I like my horizons to be straight. So I'm going to go in to the crop and grab 5x7. Now, they say, whoever they are, that you probably should crop your photo to another size other than straight out of camera because that's the point and shoot size. Though I believe that point and shoots also come in 8x10 now. So anyway, I don't know. I crop to 5x7. Old habits die hard. So when I say I crop, don't get confused here. It's not actually as small as a 5x7, it is the ratio of a 5x7. So what that means, I can blow that up to 16x20 or whatever size that I want to without losing detail. Okay, it's just the ratio of a 5x7, it's not actually a crop of a 5x7. Okay, so I'm going to press enter on that, and now I've straightened. So now, last but not least, is I might just overall lighten the image just a touch. Okay, now let's go into before and after. So as you can see, in Lightroom, I've been able to bring back a lot of that detail without even taking it into Photoshop. So let's take that into Photoshop now. Now we're in Photoshop, and this is CS6, which is the latest version. I'll probably again have another version out by the end of the year, and I will be upgrading. So I have my photo in the window of CS6, and the only thing that I really have open at the moment, other than properties, is the layers window, and that's a very important window to me. And to have that open, I just go to Window, Layers. I work solely off the white layers window, to be honest with you, most of the time. There are a couple of ways to do every single step that I'm going to do with you, but I tend to do it from the layers window or from the image adjustment area. Okay, so my layers window, I have that open. First things first is I'm going to duplicate the layer, and I'll just press OK on that. You can press Ctrl J, that does the same thing for those of you that use the keyboard. Now, I have my duplicated layer, and I'm simply going to go under normal and change that to soft light. Now what soft light does is it adds contrast and a little bit of saturation. Now you don't want to have that on too much. In fact, I tend to erase that off on the skin tone. So what I've done here is I've grabbed the erase brush, and remembering this is just a layer, and my opacity is at 100, and I'm just going to erase off on the shadows underneath that bath there, her hand, and on her skin tones. So now it's barely doing anything, but it's just enough to contrast the photo up. Now I'm going to go down to the bottom of the layers window, down here, press the yin and yang I call it, and do a hue saturation mask. And that actually brings up the properties window. And with that, I am actually going to raise the saturation up on that a fair bit. Now watch what happens to the colours when you saturate things up. You don't want to saturate it so much that the colours start to spill out and there's actually no colour in there at all. You still want to be able to print it. So I'm just going to go to the extent of that, the very edge of being able to do that. Now, as I did erase off before with the erase tool, this time I can erase off with a mask. So I've got a black colour in the foreground colour. I'm going to grab a brush and I'm going to click on this layer here and simply click on the areas where it's saturated too much. Now, the reason that I didn't use vibrance in this case is because there are oranges in the sky that I actually would like to keep. Now, the opacity of my brush is 55%. So vibrance, when you use vibrance instead of saturation, which is another way of doing it, it actually doesn't saturate up the sky. Oh, let me explain that again. It actually doesn't saturate up the skin tone, so therefore the sky wouldn't have been saturated. Much better, Barb. Okay, so now I'm just going to, with a lower opacity of 28%, erase off on the balloons. So that hasn't taken the whole saturation off, but it's taken off a little bit. So there's a before and after. Alright, so I've kept the saturation on the areas that I'm interested in keeping the saturation on. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is flatten that. Now, they say, whoever they are, that you shouldn't flatten too many times. So if you don't want to do that, don't do it. But apparently it harms the file. But I've found it's fine. I am working off a TIFF, so I think it's fine. Okay, so now I'm going to go down to the adjustment area down here and click on levels. Alright, so now I've got my levels window open. What I'm going to do down the bottom here is the output. This is the area that I tend to work in down here. Now, if you drag that across, it takes away it puts detail back in the shadows and it makes it a bit hazy. If you drag that the other way, it puts grey in the highlights. Really, really handy if you need to put detail back in blowouts where you've accidentally overexposed. Now, I'm going to grab the adjustment brush and just paint over on her because I'd like her to stand out and the area around her to be hazy. I'm going to bring that opacity of that brush up. Okay. So now what it's done is it hazes out the area around her. Okay. Now, what I would like to do is add in a little bit more pink. Now this isn't, I'm not going to make this go onto her skin tones, it will at first. So I have gone in to the yin and yang and selected the channel mixer. And it brings up this window here. Now all I'm going to change is the red. Everything else stays the same. And I'm just going to change the red up to 104. Okay. Now as you can see, it's actually, sorry about that, it's actually made the whole entire image pink. So I'm just going to grab an adjustment brush again and remove that from her skin. Okay. Even maybe from the bath a little bit. So I'm just after picking up that sky a little bit. So now the sky is even more sunset, which it was already there. However, it's just a little bit more of the sunset feel. Okay, so now I'm going to get it ready for the last things to do, and that is I've duplicated the layer, pressing Ctrl J. I'd like to do a Gaussian blur. So I'm going to do filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Now there are lots and lots of blurs that you can do. This is the blur that I used back in CS0, so just CS, and I've stuck with it since. Okay, so my radius, I usually have it on, you can have it anywhere because you can reduce the opacity down, but let's just put it on about 22. Okay, well that ended up being 23, but that's alright. Now I'm going to grab the erase brush, and this is important, at 100% I'm going to erase off on her. In fact, I can now get a bigger brush and a planar field in which she is sitting. And this is called reverse sharpening. Now, I tend not to sharpen at all. Now, I do use action, so the majority of things that you see me doing are an action. However, when I have an action and the layers are, there is a sharpening layer within the action, I usually turn it off because I don't actually want sharpening, because most of my clients purchase prints that are very large, and when you sharpen, when they're printed up very big, it can pixelate. So I tend not to sharpen. I can look at that full print later if I am going to do it, but honestly I tend to leave it. I'm not really that keen on sharpening. When you import things into Lightroom, Lightroom already has a sharpen there. And here it is, sharpening. So it's already done a little bit of sharpening when it naturally hits Lightroom anyway. Alright, so I've erased off on the sky, and on the little sweet girl, and on the ground in which she is sitting. And that is barely noticeable, that Gaussian blur, and I'm going to reduce the opacity of that layer down to about 30. Okay, now I'm going to flatten that. Alright, last but not least, Control J to duplicate the layer. These things in the sky bother me, and they're little bits of grass, that's all they are. So I'm just going to remove just some of them. Around the horizon is fine, but I'd prefer them not to be there, so I'm just going to remove those off. Okay, now what I've used to do this is the patch tool, and the patch tool is under the spot heal brush in the toolbar. And I'm simply lassoing the area with the patch tool that I want to get rid of and dragging it over to an area where I don't mind it looking like. Now that cloud there, even though I just dragged it over here, it's actually got a line, so I probably should drag it to here. Alright. Alright, now I'm going to grab the dodge tool, and I do dodge a lot, you'll see that in the videos. I'm going to raise the exposure to about 16, and I'm going to leave the protect tones off. And I'm just going to dodge on her a little bit. Okay. Alright. So, and the bath actually. I'm going to raise the exposure and dodge on the bath. Now, that's obviously way too much. I'm going to dodge the balloons back as well. What I'll do is now go to Edit, Fade, Dodge, and just fade that down. Alright. And there we have it. So I've faded that layer, the dodging down. Okay, so I'm going to flatten that, and let's go back to Lightroom, press reset. Okay, so this is before, and after. I'll see you in the next video.